Welcome to this edition of Akron Buzz. My name is Aaron Coleman, and I am joined by Nate Ulrich of the Akron Beacon Journal to talk a little Cleveland Browns football here in the offseason, talk a little bit about what the team is up to, their great season in 2019-2020, and what they have been up to here as of late. Nate, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks again for joining me. First of all, when you look at the Cleveland Browns season in 2020, it was really marked by a stark change in Kevin Stefanski, a coach that came in, knew what he was doing right away, and brought his attitude, his energy to this team. What, if anything, was the biggest change in Kevin Stefanski and how he kind of changed the culture up in Cleveland?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there because he came into Browns headquarters in January. He got hired on January 12th. He does his introductory news conference. Then they, go to the combine in February. Then the pandemic hits. And he really didn't get to meet many players before it happened, Aaron, before the country, for the most part, shut down. He went out to meet Baker Mayfield in Baker's hometown of Austin, Texas, before the lockdown started. And that proved to be a crucial meeting because we all know how important that head coach quarterback relationship is.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, there were a lot of guys he did not get to meet in person until August, believe it or not. I mean, 7 months after he was hired. And that's just so rare. It never happens that way. Normally he would have guys in, well before then, the full team by April for the offseason workout program. Right. It all went virtual. And he did a tremendous job when you talk about changing the culture of team building, fostering that bonding, making guys really feel like family and care about each other. He did it via Zoom. The way we're communicating, believe it or not, he got guys to connect via Zoom. He used a couple different things. These team building exercises called the 4 H's, where guys talk about their hopes, heroes, heartbreaks, and I don't know the exact order that you put those H's in, but he got it from one of his buddies who's a VCU assistant men's basketball coach. He got that idea from him, and guys really poured their hearts into this thing. The players shared stories that were very personal. They bonded over it. And then Stefanski did a lot of fun things. Like he had a slam dunk contest where guys could take videos of themselves doing slam dunks, whether they're like sweet windmill dunks on real hoops like Myles Garrett, or literally taking a chocolate chip cookie and dunking it into a glass of milk like J.C. Tretter, the center, did. Or I talked to the long snapper, Charlie Hewlett. He had a newborn baby at the time, and he just dunked a diaper into a trash can. They did fun things like that. They had poster contests where they reenacted different, movie posters or scenes or whatever. And Charlie Hewlett, again, I talked to him about all these team building exercises, and he reenacted that Baker Mayfield underwear ad where he's standing by the Rolls Royce with the tiger, shirtless. Charlie Hewlett did that in his driveway. He set up a tripod and took photos of himself out in a driveway with a watch wrapped around his head. So a lot of fun things that Stefanski did so these guys could actually connect. And by the time they got together in August, they really had formed a team. And I think that's something that we haven't seen in a long time with the Browns. He had these guys become really tight-knit, and he did it in unusual circumstances.
Yeah, he certainly did. And when you talk about the meetings that he had over Zoom, the way we're communicating right now, and just the team building exercises that he did, it really goes to show you that having someone with these kind of fresh ideas and being a little bit on the younger side really paid off for D and Jimmy Haslam and the ownership group to kind of have somebody to bring a fresh perspective into the mix.
I think you're exactly right. For 2020, you needed outside the box thinking more than ever. Mm-hmm. And being 38, I think that he did kind of capture that moment the way he needed to in the pandemic with some of the things we're talking about. And Andrew Berry being the youngest GM in NFL history was like his, right-hand man with this stuff. And those guys really clicked and connected. And you want to talk about a difference in culture and Berea within those walls of Browns headquarters. The GM and the head coach, we talked about the head coach and the quarterback and how important that relationship is. The other huge, really important relationship for any NFL franchise is head coach and GM. And Stefanski and Barry really get along that way. And outside the box thinking, being younger guys, I think really helps. And they really did, just find themselves in sync with each other. And another thing that they dealt with, not just the pandemic in the spring, these guys had to address difficult conversations, after the death of George Floyd. I mean, players are deeply affected by this, as so many people in this country were. And Stefanski and Barry led conversations, organizational conversations, not just with the players, but organizational wide. That organization got behind the discussions and got into the discussions of racial and social inequality. Stefanski went to a peaceful protest. He encouraged his players to do the same. So, it wasn't just all fun and games over Zoom, and it wasn't just all 4-H's. There were these real raw, conversations taking place about what the country was going through, pandemic aside. So,
right.
Stefanski and Barry, I think, really did strike the right notes with the organization and the players, and when they were dealing with that in the spring before they could even get together in person.
Certainly. And Nate, as we kind of transition a little bit to on the field and everything, obviously the Browns came out of the gate rough against the Baltimore Ravens. They were blown out in the loss, but they really never looked back since. And there was a turning point in the season, I would say around game 5 or 6, where Baker Mayfield kind of took that next step as a quarterback in the league. Nate, you're there, you're covering camp, you've covered the games. When did it really start to click for Baker? And do you see his 5th-year option being picked up this offseason?
Well, Aaron, the way it went for Baker Mayfield is, they get blown out in the opener, like you said, but then they bounce back and they have a 4-game winning streak. Now, he was not lighting the world on fire. If you remember, they were running the ball really well, as you'd expect, with a good offensive line that ended up being a great offensive line by the end of the year, and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield. What a tandem. So they were running the ball well. They were leaning on that offensively. And then Myles Garrett was playing like an NFL Defensive Player of the Year early on in the season. Those strip sacks that he had came at crucial times against, especially Cincinnati, the game right after the Baltimore blowout. He had a huge strip sack on Joe Burrow. He had one on Dwayne Haskins against Washington in subsequent games, and they were turning the ball over, and he was leading the charge. And in that period, Baker, he was okay, but he went through some rough stretches. And then they got to the Pittsburgh game, and then they got blown out again. And this one was 38-7, nearly that score as the opener. And he didn't even finish the game. He was pummeled. He had suffered a cracked rib in the previous game against the Colts. It was a win, and he looked good in the first half of that game, but then really struggled in the second half against the Colts. Had the rib injury, and then the Steelers just teed off on him. He threw 2 bad interceptions. One was a pick 6 on his first pass of the game. That was like the low point for Baker Mayfield. And then they got to the bye week. And that gave Kevin Stefanski, the offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, and Baker Mayfield a chance to regroup and kind of play catch up a little bit. They had some of the conversations about what does Baker like, what Baker doesn't like, what's he most comfortable with. You have all these conversations on Zoom, but they didn't really get together. They weren't able to work it all out in practices on the field together and then in games, and then kind of regroup, powwow, and hash it all out the way they wanted to until the bye week. Baker Stefanski and Van Pelt have described that bye week as being vital to what they were able to accomplish later. And they're really able to kind of get on the same page. They played, all his interceptions. They put him on an interception reel, and the light bulb just seemed to go off. And he caught fire after that and really played very well down the stretch, the second half of the season, and then into the playoffs. As for the fifth-year option, they're absolutely, at minimum, going to pick up the fifth-year option. That decision's due in early May. So that's not really a question anymore in the minds of the Browns as much as whether they're going to extend his contract this offseason. I could see them doing it. Right now, I'm leaning toward them extending him this offseason. Andrew Berry has not wanted to talk about this publicly. He's kept it very close to the vest. And he said that basically he just doesn't like to discuss this business, through the media. But he did seem to drop a hint when he said that he thinks that Baker is on the same trajectory that Myles Garrett was last year. And what they did with Myles Garrett last year is they picked up that fifth-year option. They announced it like the last few days of April. And then when it came to July, he had a record-setting contract extension that they agreed to. So I could see them picking up the fifth-year option and then in the summer, extending Baker Mayfield. I'm leaning toward them doing that. Of course, it's not the end of the world if they don't extend him before the season. They still very well could extend him maybe during the season or after. They might just want to buy themselves a little bit of time. From a team perspective, usually you want to see as large a sample size as possible. So you can make sure that last half of the 2020 season was the real deal and that they're going to continue to see that caliber of play from Baker Mayfield in Kevin Stefanski's offense. The risk in that is that he comes out and he is playing that well at the beginning of the 2021 season. Well, you're just going to have to pay him more than you would have if you would have paid him in the summer. He's going to drive up his own market value. So we'll see. I think he is the future. I think that's what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski think. I think they've looked at all the head coaches, 3 full-time head coaches the Browns have had since they drafted Baker Mayfield first overall in 2018, and 3 playbooks. So I think they look at that and they think, well, this guy just hasn't had the benefit of continuity at all, and he's going to grow and improve when we give him that chance to be in the same offense for 2 seasons in a row. So I think that they're very confident in him and that they believe in him, and it's just a matter of how this is going to work out on the business end.
Yeah, certainly. And switching over to the defensive side of the ball, obviously there were some key pieces there, guys like Myles Garrett, and you lose some quality members of the secondary before the season even starts. Grant Delpit was lost due to injury. Greedy Williams lost due to injury. And the Browns struggled on the back end. And they also kind of struggled a little bit in the linebacking core as well at times. Do you see the Browns addressing either one of those positions in free agency or through the draft this year as the offseason unfolds, Nate?
Yes. All the above, all across the board. I think this offseason is largely about the defense.
Yep.
I think they're going to do some things on offense too, but if you think about last offseason when Andrew Berry got that job a couple of weeks after Stefanski in January, he came in and he had a plan to really improve the offensive line. 2 new tackles. He signed Jack Conklin to a blockbuster contract, 3 years, $42 million. And then he drafted Jedrick Wills a month later, 10th overall, the first-round pick that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Your starting left tackle, your starting right tackle. It ended up working out really well. Wills played well as a rookie, made a nice transition that I was skeptical about, and I think a lot of people were skeptical about, but he made a nice transition from the right side in high school and college to the left side in the NFL, despite no spring practices, despite no preseason games, made a really nice transition. So you got to give a lot of credit for Andrew Berry to believe and have reason to believe and trust his scouting and information he had that Wills would be able to do that. And Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, played a huge role in figuring all that out and then overseeing the project that was moving Wills to the left side. Conklin was an all-pro. We don't have to say much more. Great sign. So there you go. They also brought in tight end Austin Hooper. I think he left a lot to be desired given the contract that he signed. But to be fair, he had something really weird happen, appendicitis, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, that doesn't happen every day.
No, but it has happened twice since I've covered the Browns in 11 seasons. It also happened.
Wow.
Yeah, but Austin Hooper missed 3 games after having the appendectomy, but is a good player. So my point is, those were the big splashes by Andrew Berry last offseason. I think we're going to see that on the defensive side. I think we're going to see defensive ends and corners being the big ticket items, whether it's a first-round pick at 26 overall or a big, free agent signing. I think a combination of that is going to address defensive end and cornerback, and I think they will also try to upgrade linebacker. But this regime does not seem willing or likely or in favor of heavily investing in linebackers. So I would be surprised if you see a big splash free agent signing or a first-round pick on a linebacker.
For sure. And taking a look at the NFL as a whole, just a little bit, I mean, obviously you have quality quarterbacks all across the AFC, guys like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. It seems as though the Browns have finally solved their quandary at that position. But you also have to have quality coaching and play calling. If you watch the Super Bowl, Nate, Byron Leftwich did a masterful job calling plays in that Super Bowl for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Kevin Stefanski doubles as both the offensive coordinator, play caller, as well as the head coach. They had a similar situation in the previous year with Freddie Kitchens doing those same duties. It's almost like a night and day difference. I mean, you have the quarterback is the same. Most of the offensive pieces are the same, but the guy pulling the trigger and pushing the controls is completely different. How underrated was Stefanski's time management, game management aspect, and how that played a role into their successful season?
I think it played a huge role. Is it underrated? I think some people might take it for granted, but I think Browns fans probably don't, because Browns fans have seen, to your point, Aaron, Freddie Kitchens, Pat Shurmur, who else? Rob Chudzinski, Hugh Jackson. They've seen plenty of coaches come in with the offensive background, try to call their own plays, and it just doesn't work out well. That's a lot. There are plenty of guys throughout the league who do it well, but there are a lot of guys, it seems to me, more so who don't, and we've seen a lot of them come through here. And Stefanski, he's just so sharp. I mean, he really is a very, very smart guy, and I think he also is a collaborative guy. I think that he is a trustworthy guy, and in the assistant coaches he hired Alex Van Pelt and Bill Callahan and Chad O'Shea, all guys who have had that play calling experience. And I think that, he understands that they're doing their job. So if he has his eyes on his call sheet, he's not going to panic, knowing that his staff is going to pick up that slack. And they're just able to kind of, work that way during the game so Stefanski can juggle those roles and knows and feels comfortable with the safety net he has with those assistants. He's not a meddler that way. So I really think that is a big part of it. Not only is he really intelligent and really sharp, but he trusts those assistants and he knows how to communicate with them very well. And they're on the same page. It's not too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a unit. It's like the 5 fingers that you use to describe an offensive line. They're working together. So I think that's the way I've used Stefanski. And yeah, he won NFL Coach of the Year. So you got to give him a lot of credit. The Browns offense took so many steps, and obviously Baker Mayfield had a great bounce back after a pretty bad 2019 in which he really regressed.
And to wrap it up here, Nate, it appears as though the Browns are won as they have been for many, many years. One, in terms of the market for sports fans here in Northeast Ohio, with the Indians struggling a little bit and dealing their most valuable players in Francisco Lindor and Cookie Carrasco. The Cavs are up and coming, but it appears as though for the first time the Browns have the target on their back as far as being successful and being able to be a viable NFL franchise. But it looks like with the men in the room, as far as the players, the coaching staff, the front office, it seems like they're ready to handle that responsibility and take the next step forward for the first time since 1999. How do you feel about the trajectory, long, medium term, for this franchise moving forward?
Well, I think it starts at the most important pieces for an NFL franchise, and head coach, quarterback, GM. I feel pretty confident about all of them. And, a year ago, I would not have said that about Baker Mayfield. I mean,
Right.
but the way that he really did bounce back was very impressive. He seems to fit exactly what Stefanski wants to do on offense. And let's face it, it started with Baker getting in shape. I mean, he was not in good physical shape in 2019 for NFL quarterback standards. And he really worked hard in the offseason. You hear all the time about guys transforming their bodies in the offseason. Well, it's not usually the quarterback, Aaron, but this time it was. And really, he was able to move around and maneuver in that pocket the way he was during his rookie season when he impressed all of us so much. And that's crucial when you're running the bootlegs and the play action and the stuff that Stefanski wants to make the bread and butter of this offense. Baker did, and he did it well. So I think that you have to be optimistic about the Browns because of those guys and the core. I mean, the core of guys. When you think about their star power, Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, Odell Jr., Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, Denzel Ward. We're talking guys who are young. I mean, Odell and Jarvis are the elder statesmen of that group, and they're like 28. So I think because you have such a young core, and let's face it, you still have some pretty good flexibility with the salary cap. You're going to have to be paying some guys. You're going to be dealing with a COVID cap, meaning that because of the revenue shortfall, NFL teams are all going to have less to spend this offseason than they normally do. The salary cap hasn't been set, but it's going to be significantly less for each team. But you've got a decent amount of cap room. You're going to be able to manage that, I think. Andrew Berry is very, very, very smart, and he is going to be on top of all that stuff. He's going to have to pick and choose when he extends certain guys and which guys he waits on. But I think that the arrow is up across the board because of those guys, because of the youth, because of the salary cap flexibility. And I'll just leave you on this, Aaron, but I mentioned it earlier. It's not, a headline grabber for most people. But really, this game of football is all about the trenches. And the Browns, by the end of the season, had one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in football. On the other side of the ball, they have Myles Garrett, who was a legitimate NFL Defensive Player of the Year candidate. COVID ruined that for him. It interfered with his season. He missed 2 games. He was never the same after it. He got the virus in November. But he's the piece that you can build an elite defensive line around. And with those players on both sides of the ball in the trenches, I think we have to mention that as a reason why the Browns should be good for a while now.
Nate Ulrich from the Akron Beacon Journal here joining us on Akron Buzz. You can check out all of his great work on Ohio.com, as well as his Twitter by Nate Ulrich. You can check him out, and you can check him out in print as well. You can check out all of the great Akron Buzz interviews, not only on our Facebook page, but also on our website, akronbuzz.com, as well as other social media outlets as well. For Nate Ulrich, I'm Aaron Coleman saying so long. This has been Akron Buzz. Make it a great day. Thanks for watching.